Did you turn the mics on, Rich?
Yes.
She's not. Just go and check that out.
I turned them on.
There we go. Okay, people can hear me. All right. Good evening, everyone. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, if I could have a motion to approve the agenda for the budget meeting tonight of February 24th, 2025. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. I'll move us to open forum. The Greenville Central School District wishes to facilitate public access to meetings of the Board of Education and to provide an opportunity for public comment at these meetings. Accordingly, the open forum provides an opportunity for members of the public to share thoughts about topics on the agenda. An individual's comments shall be limited to 5 minutes. Additionally, comments may be emailed to the district clerk, Daphne Pearson, using the email pearsond@greenvillecsd.org. In order for an email to be read during the meeting, it must be received by 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting and state that the email is to be read out loud. Emails shall be limited to 600 words. Please note that this is not the time to register complaints that need to be addressed confidentially through the proper channels. Remarks that might be considered defamatory, obscene, profane, stigmatizing, or otherwise impermissible in public forums are prohibited and will be declared out of order. Board members actively listen during the open forum, but may not immediately respond to comments. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Do we have any emails?
I do not.
Okay, then I'm going to move us on to the presentation. And first, I'd like to welcome Kelsey Mayo, our Latin teacher, who is going to talk about a Latin trip 2026. Please come and join us. It sounds exciting. Can we go?
You have to push the white button.
Push the...
Yep.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Kelsey Mayo. I'm the middle and high school Latin teacher here. And I just wanted to kind of submit for your consideration, make you aware of some planning that has been going on to a potential trip to Rome and Pompeii/Herculaneum over spring break of 2026. Students have been interested in this for a long time. And after being here for several years, I thought it was time that we give it a go and think about it. Over the past couple months, I've been corresponding with 3 different tour companies that offer packages for students who specialize in this kind of educational travel with students. And they were all shockingly expensive. But the one that I sort of had came with the best recommendations and I knew of before and sort of followed up and seemed to present the best plan. It's called ACIS. You may have heard of it before, some of you. And they do educational trips everywhere, but they have a lot of trips in Italy, different types, and are able to sort of customize it according to, we're interested in seeing classical things. So it would be, the potential trip would be 8 days over spring break of 2026. And thinking about who can come on this trip, it's definitely a trip that's geared toward older high school students, I think. And to appreciate, and celebrate the students who have chosen to continue in Latin, sort of settled on the idea that it would be open to students who have completed the Regents level of the Latin program. So that would be 10th grade and up, completed 10th grade and up. And, you know, there are several students who continue on into IB, but there are some students who choose not to, but we wanted to, you know, consider that, offer that opportunity to them. The cost is very expensive. It's about estimated, and it was roughly equivalent among the three that I contacted, so that seems to be the going rate. It's about $5,300 per person. And of course, we're hoping to be able to do fundraisers to defray the cost for families, because that is a very expensive thing to ask. And also, we have the Burke Fund, which was donated, you know, money available to the World Language Department, and exploring that as a possibility to help defray the cost for any individual student. So that's the planning that's gone on behind the scenes already. And ACIS is very good. Like, they handle all the logistics. Like, they would be the ones in charge of that. Price includes all the travel, everything. The only thing that it probably wouldn't cover is transportation to the airport that we depart from. And there's a considerable discount if you leave from a larger airport like Boston versus Albany. So that could be something to consider too. So the next steps, sorry, I don't want to talk too long, but the next steps would be to hold a parent-student interest meeting and sort of see if there's, you know, interest behind this, who would like to come. And I believe the final, you know, yays or nays have to be in by November. So for the planning, who would like to come. So that's what has been going on for this. And if you all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them if I can.
I have a question.
Sure.
What are you thinking for fundraising?
That is something that I am not particularly well experienced in, so I would really need to talk to people who are more familiar with fundraising campaigns. I think there are quite a few in the high school and middle school who have done those. To be honest, that's something that's a little intimidating to add to what. No, that's okay. But I think it would be important because I want the kids to feel invested in it too. That they're, you know, it's not just, oh, there's a lottery of money and here you go. You know, you want to have some skin in the game too to really make it that it's theirs also.
Do you know about, number-wise, about how many might be available, or?
Right, in terms of students who
Yes.
want to go. So currently there are, just the IB classes, the current juniors, there are 5 of them. In the 10th grade, current 10th grade Latin class, there are 12 students. It's hard to gauge who could go because I didn't really want to put them on the, you know, I haven't even really brought this to them formally. So that would be, if everybody went, you know, it would be, you know, 17 people. But obviously there are some students who stopped taking Latin after 10th grade that if they wanted to come and show the initiative and, you know, follow through, then they would be welcome to come as well.
And of that, say for instance 17, chaperone-wise, what's the target?
Yeah, we would definitely need at least 2 chaperones. And I would really like to have myself and a male chaperone to have like a female and male chaperone. If people wanted to come, if like parents wanted to come, that's something we need to talk about. I haven't quite thought through, you know, other adults wanting to come. I don't know what the policy is on that, but I'm sure that's a question that would come up at some point.
Sorry, do you want to say something? All right, my next question is, this is a big thing. So you're thinking of doing this every year or like alternating years?
Yeah, definitely not every year. I think in other schools, they kind of go on a model where it's maybe every 2 to 3 years, so that every student who falls in the, you know, in the pathway has an opportunity to go. I think every year, there are some schools that do it every year, but they tend to be much bigger schools and have the infrastructure to handle that.
Do you know, 2 questions. Number 1, is there a minimum for the tour company?
So there, as I understand it currently, the minimum is like, I believe it's 5 or 6. If you have a smaller group, anything under than 20, my liaison said that sometimes you might be joined, not for the whole time, but in certain tour groupings with other students, other high school students who are touring Pompeii that day or something. But if, I believe she said if you have more, I have to check in our communication, that if it's 20 or more, then you're totally your own unit. So you have your own bus, you have your own XYZ, which is Greenville only.
Okay, and then in terms of the fundraising to offset costs, do you anticipate any students Or do we have something in place where if a student cannot afford it, but falls within the criteria, would that be allowed?
In terms of sort of scholarship available, I mean, we do have, that could be something that we could bring to the Burke Fund to, you know, if there were demonstrated, you know, financial hardship or financial need.
I know there's things in place for kids to take their IB exams and SATs for grades, and they meet certain criteria, and I don't want to see any of our kids not be able to have.
Totally. Yeah, my initial thinking was it would be great if our fundraising could cover a third, the Burke Fund could cover a third, and then, you know, families, if possible, could cover a third of the cost. But like you said, it would, you know, I wouldn't want to turn anybody away either. I realize it's a big financial ask.
Yeah, and I would suggest that we take a look at that, because again, unlike the IB test and those things are much cheaper than a $5,300 ask to go overseas. So we would have to take a look at the breakdown, whether it's a third, and then that final parent third, if there's an issue with finances and to demonstrate that need, we'd have to take a look at how much we could potentially scholarship through the school district.
And there's sort of a semi-formal process for requesting money from this fund that the world language teachers have been going through. And I haven't done that because I haven't gone through that informal process yet because I didn't, you know, want to preemptively without presenting to you all first. But in informal conversations with some of those board members, they have seemed amenable to that.
I just have two quick things. One would be, is there a, I would say, achievement of a grade level that you would, and then the other would be is, my understanding is this is not the first time that they've had a trip for a Latin trip. It's happened years ago.
I believe it has. That was before I worked here. I don't think there have been any international trips in a while, however. To your first point, I'm not quite sure how to handle the academic achievement part of it. Like, it seems, obviously, I personally want the best students to go, but it seems unfair to say you have to have an A average to access this extra opportunity, although I would like to put in place some sort of application to go. You know, you're, in addition to, you know, behavioral expectations, XYZ, you're also committing to an academic component while we're over there, number one, and sort of really demonstrating that you want to go, that there's a impetus behind your interest.
Kelsey, I think as far as like the academic, for me it would be they must be passing the course.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think they have to be an A, but.
Yeah. I think that, you know, successfully completed 10th grade Latin, passed the regents, that seems.
And currently passing in if you are taking it, but those are kind of details. The one thing that I would highly recommend is mandatory insurance, because talking about previous trips, in the past, we let the families decide if they wanted to take insurance, and unfortunately, at the last trip, they didn't go. And not all families had taken insurance, and so we were kind of in a very delicate situation where actually families were asking the school board for reimbursement. So that may be something that, don't make it discretionary, it's an absolute must.
Right. I believe ACIS has insurance built into their price point. So, and I think they also offer supplementary insurance. If people are interested, I can forward the whole packet that they have sent me. But their price includes insurance, I believe.
Right. It was due to a medical situation, and so that's where I'm not sure if it's covered or not.
Oh, right.
That
Like
anyone
insurance.
attending, right? Exactly.
Yeah,
I think you might want to cover it. Just,
Yeah.
It's worth the $50 or $150. Just bake it in.
Yeah.
For that. And then you had asked the question of, there used to be 2 trips, so one to Italy for the Latin department, and then one to Spain for the Spanish department. let's see, I think your class was the last one.
It was a long time ago.
Right, yeah, decades.
Yeah, definitely post, I have class teacher colleagues who are starting, post-COVID, nobody's gone really since COVID, so starting up those, there's a lot of institutional memory that may have been lost, or a reminder of how to do things and when to do things, so.
Right. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I think that traveling just opens doors for people. And it's one thing, if you go to Rome and you see the Colosseum and you really understand. It's one thing to see it on Gladiator or a movie. It's another thing to sit there and just take in the size of it and everything else. So I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, I don't think I would be a Latin teacher if I hadn't studied abroad in Italy for a year in college, so it can change your life.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Absolutely.
Does the cost per person, is that absorbed for the 2 chaperones and the teacher?
It is at a certain minimum of people enroll. So I think for the 1 chaperone, it's 5 or 6 students. And then, I have to look it up, I think maybe an additional 10, another chaperone would practice.
Do you have a minimum number of students in mind?
I believe, I'm not
You
sure.
said 5, but you personally
I
think it's not worth going, or?
I personally don't have a minimum. I mean, you would want a critical mass. I would say 5 or 6, but if it were only 5, I would still want to provide that opportunity for them if it would work out.
And this is a year out, right? So you have, if it looks like there's moderate interest, but maybe not enough, I wonder if the possibility of reaching out to a neighboring school, and I don't know of any other big school that has Latin, but they certainly have Spanish. And you could see if there's any interest there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I have a good friend who's a Latin teacher in Niskuna, and I asked her about it. They're going this year, so we're off by a cycle. But there are a couple of bigger schools that have Latin, like Shen has Latin. There are a couple of others, Saratoga, I think, has them. So I think that could be a good idea. I'm a little, tiny bit nervous about taking kids I personally don't know, but their teacher would come too. So one reason this tour company really appealed to me is that they're very professional. They know what they're doing. They particularly guide smaller programs. Like I feel very comfortable in Italy, but I've never led students there before. So that would be I wanted a company that was a little more maybe full service is the wrong word, but that manages those transitions and those relationships for you on the ground.
Along the lines of Dave's question, though, is there anything else in our IB department, any other classes or anything where the kids could benefit from this?
Oh, I'm sure. In fact, sometimes we do kind of IB trips with the other IB classes, so like music or art and Spanish too. I would be open to that if people, with the caveat that it's very classics focused. So we're doing ancient Italy, Pompeii, we wouldn't go to Florence, for example, for people who are really into Renaissance art. Or it would be more Latin, classical focused.
I think it's a great idea. It seems that I agree, Tracy. I think it's a great opportunity for the kids. And I know, as we heard, it's been a very long time since there's been an international trip like this. I think it would be great to see it brought back in some way. So, good luck.
Thank you.
We're hearing more about how it develops.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's a great idea. Alrighty, I'm going to move us on to the budget presentation, and tonight we're going to be talking about the program component. So, who am I turning it over to? Todd? Mike, take it away, please.
Yeah, so again, I know for the board, this is an important time in which we start to take a look at our budget, and as we move forward tonight, you'll have an opportunity to hear from many of our leadership. And as we move through this presentation, I just want to redirect everyone once again to base all the conversations and everything we talk about on our district mission and goals. We want to make sure that that is at the forefront of our conversations when we have our conversations as a cabinet, then individually with each of the programs. We want to make sure that this is part of how we're rooted in our conversations. So we will have Todd kind of move through the front of this before we start to hear from our leadership team. So,
Thanks, Mike. So we're going to start with a couple of slides that should look familiar because we start each budget presentation with them. So this first one, the first one is actually Mike talking about those goals and the connection that our budget conversations have to our mission, vision, and goals. This next one is our budget timeline, just kind of giving a pulse of where we are in the overall budget development process. So if you look in the dark band under February, the things that have happened during this month and also tipping back into January. We do a review of our current enrollment and the proposed staffing requirements that are needed for that enrollment. We reviewed and evaluate budgets by building and by departments. So Mike and I have meetings with each supervisor and then each administrator to go through the budgets for departments and buildings. Also a significant thing that happens in the month of February is the tax cap calculations. So you got a little preview of that at the last meeting when Chris DiCarlo presented that long-range financial analysis. So we'll revisit that later on in tonight's presentation. Also, we have the initial state aid runs, so the executive budget from the governor, so we have an idea of where some of those state aid numbers will start to fall. So busy month. February is definitely a busy month in the budget development process. So for tonight's presentation, just reviewing the documents that are posted on board docs on the website, and then also what folks have in front of them. There's the slide deck that we'll be working through as an administrative team. There is the supporting documents page. So on a number of the slides tonight in the bottom left corner, you might see, refer to page 9 through 11. That's referring back to the supporting document page. So if tonight or at a later time you're looking at that and have a question about a certain slide, that just refers you back to the supporting document that has a lot more detail and a lot more information in it. And then the third document tonight is one that you will see each budget presentation. It's the preliminary budget. So it is a list of every single appropriation code for the full budget. It shows what the amount budgeted was in this current year, what it was budgeted for in the rollover budget that we presented back in January, and then where it stands currently with the budget that we're presenting tonight. You'll get this same document again next week with some updates because a lot happens in a week between tonight and next week when we're back talking about the other components. There will be adjustments and changes, so you'll get that document again next week with updates. So that's the third document that you have tonight. Also, just before we move any further, any questions that come up throughout this evening, by all means just ask, and then at the end we'll also have an opportunity for any remaining questions.
I have a question. Who's surprised? That was my question, actually. This document you provided tonight,
Yep.
I really appreciate that for the previous years, you have created a column that's labeled expense, so that's what was actual expended, right?
Correct.
I was wondering if you could do the same thing for the entire preliminary budget, going back 2 years.
So how much for each code, how much we expended current year and last year?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I guess current year to date.
Well, we do current year to date plus what we project we're going to spend between now and the end of the year. Like we encumber everything that we anticipate spending. Yes, it's what we've expensed to date and then what we have encumbered, plan to spend between now and the end of the year. Obviously, if we look at that information for last year, it's a more hard number, right? That's the definite amount that we spent in last year's budget for that code. But yes, we can work that into another document. This next slide also hopefully looks a little familiar. This is another way of thinking about the budget, 3 main decision points that happen throughout the budget process. For the purpose of tonight, it's on that left-hand side in the maroon. It says manage program and staffing, and budget priorities established really between last month up until current day. So the collaborative process that we have where we gather information from faculty and staff, that goes to supervisors and administrators, and then comes up to my level and Mike to look at that and put together what we're presenting tonight. That collaborative process is very much what happens in that maroon area. And then one last slide, again, hopefully looks familiar, this budget development formula. Tonight we are focusing on, again, the budget priorities. You'll hear the administrators talk about the areas that they've requested changes and additions for the budget for next year, and then also budget modifications that happen consistently really throughout the month of February. What's happening today, so some of these numbers that you're looking at tonight will be outdated by the end of the day tomorrow. Those are all budget modifications that continually happen between now and the final adopted budget. But in this budget overall formula, those are the 2 areas that we are looking at tonight. Just as a preview, what we will look at next week will involve these other 2 components on the right-hand side, which is the revenue, and then also the use of fund balance and reserves. I was going to say my last slide, but I actually have a couple more slides. So before I turn it over to the administrators to talk about some of the specific areas within the budget, just giving you an overall look at where we are at currently. So looking at this current year budget, 24-25, is that first number of $35,986,000. The rollover budget that we presented to you back in January, we were at $38,048,000. And then on the bottom of this screen, it shows the preliminary budget that we're presenting tonight. It's actually slightly lower, $15,418. So really taking the preliminary budget that we're presenting tonight and comparing it to this current year budget, it would be an increase of just over $2 million, or a 5.64% increase from 24-25 budget to 25-26. So that just gives you the overall big picture where we are at in comparison to this current year. So what makes some of those changes, specifically between the rollover budget that we presented in January and the preliminary budget that we're presenting tonight? Here's a list of those items. So just to touch on these briefly. The first one is BOCES services. So between January and now, BOCES starts to put out the actual projected costs for next year. So in some of these documents where it lists all the different BOCES expenses, you'll see a little asterisk next to some of those, and then there's a little note on the bottom. The asterisk means that that is an actual expense. BOCES has released, this is what this service will cost in the 25-26 school year. There are only some, there are still others that need to be updated to the actual when we get them from BOCES, but a good number of them we have more firm numbers than we did in January. The deadline for retirements for our Greenville Faculty Association is February 1st. So between January and now, we also have an idea of how many retirements we will have. Across the district in total, we have 4 retirements at the end of this year. We also have health insurance, changed slightly from what was projected in the rollover to the initial amount that was put out by the RCG Trust. So the current estimate that RCG Trust has put out for us is a 16% increase. That's a high side, the not so good news. The good news is for our prescription plans, it's a 0% increase. So that helped offset a little bit from where we were in the rollover to where we are now. Building and department requests, this is a big part of the difference between the rollover budget and what you're going to see tonight, and that's what the administrators are here to share, some of the specific details of the requests that came from the buildings and departments. And then last but not least, special education placements. Brooke and I had a good number of quality bonding time looking at all of the projections for student placements for next year in public placements and in private placements and the impact on the budget as a result of that.
Don, question? Apologies if this was covered in the last meeting. The main drivers, so 5.64% increase in the rollover. What are the main drivers of the increase? If you can identify them, if any of them are in that slide, adjustments made since the January discussion, like what are the amounts?
Yes, so you'll see some of those tonight in the program component. If you looked at this document and just went down the column, that's the difference between the two. You'll see that the numbers, the big numbers, some of them are special ed related in terms of placements and also contract transportation. And health insurance on here is a decent number as well.
Okay.
But quickest way is if you look down that column, you can see each individual where those increases are. So tonight we are here for the program component. That's part of what is required by New York State, where we have to present the budget in 3 main components: the program, the capital, and the administrative. So tonight is focusing just on that program component. What does that include? It includes the salaries and benefits of all teachers and staff, so the folks that are working every day to deliver services to our students. It includes textbooks, instructional materials, equipment, again, the things you're going to hear administrators speak about tonight. It includes a good number of BOCES costs, so BOCES programs for students, and then it also includes all costs for transportation, with the exception of bus purchases, but driver salaries, materials and supplies, equipment for bus and the bus garage is all in the program component. So kind of our agenda for tonight, you see here, is we're going to start and have some conversation about enrollment, and then we'll work through each of these different areas, so people, personnel services, technology, the instructional side where the principals will be speaking, athletics, which Denise will speak to, and then transportation, which Mary will speak to. So with that, I will turn it over to Melissa to talk about enrollment.
Good evening, everyone. When we look at our district enrollment, you can see that we're presenting our current enrollment 24-25 year and our proposed enrollment for the 25-26 school year. The numbers in the current 23-24 column, or sorry, 24-25 column is a snapshot of our enrollment taken on the Feds Day, which is the Basic Education Data Systems Day that occurs in October. And it's an opportunity, among other things, to gather current data enrollment figures. The proposed figures in the 25-26 column are anticipated figures for next year based on the numbers at the end of January. As you can see, we're anticipating it to remain consistent with our enrollment projections, only a slight drop to our current enrollment. Next, I'm going to have you look at the graph for our homeschool population. Our projected figure is based on our analysis of our current homeschool families, outgoing students, and typical incoming numbers based on historical trends, so not too much of a change there for next year.
Can I ask you a quick question? For the special education, that increase, is that just younger identified students that are moving up?
Yeah, so the increase in student, and this is also Feds Day, so this number can change as the year goes on, but new students coming into the district from other districts, as well as newly classified students.
And are most of those in district or out of district?
Those are our own district kids, not in a district placement. Those students don't actually get counted in this number. Yeah.
The athletic numbers that you're seeing there, so what I did is I took a little bit of a different approach to this year. You can see in your supporting documents how many student athletes we have participating in every single season. I don't know what that number of that page is right off the top of my head, but Todd would probably be
3 to 5.
Oh, 3 to 5. So I highlighted those down at the bottom. You guys can take a look at that. But 260 students participated in the overall athletic program last year. 182 of them were our JV and our varsity athletes, and then 78 of those were our mods. The 24-25 school year, 250 is an estimated around that because I don't have the spring numbers yet. So next year we'll have a better idea of what that will look like. Our numbers slightly going down for the JV varsity programs and pretty much consistent for our mod programs. And it all depends on fluctuation, right? How many kids, grade levels, and how many kids are participating in each grade level.
Based on that, is it possible to also provide a percentage? Because
if the total population is going down, I expect the athletic population to also. So sometimes having a percentage just, it may be constant, so that can also tell a different story. Yeah, thank you.
So for the IT department, our goals have remained the same. Two basic goals. We want to provide good technology in each of the classroom spaces. And what I mean there is that we want both the appropriate technology, stay current, and we want it to be the same. Right? We want a teacher to have the same experience in one classroom, and they get shifted to another classroom, it's the same experience. With students, we want to provide equity also, and what that means is we maintain a one-to-one program. Every student has a device at their disposal, district-wide. And that looks different for the older students than the younger students, but they still have their own device to use when they're here in school. To make that happen, the next slide shows our long-range equipment plan. We started this back in 2014, and it's not overly complicated, but at first glance, you probably don't know you can't tell what's going on maybe. But the gist of it is we rotate machines to get 4 years out of all of the devices. We buy them on a lease purchase for that time span as well. We replace a third of the student devices every year, and then we have a fourth year where we don't do that, and that's when we replace faculty devices. So every year we're buying something, but it works, and not every student gets a brand new machine all the time, right? But but when they enter a new building, that's usually the mark for getting a new machine or a new device. Really nothing has changed in this plan other than that we are making a move toward Chromebooks. We had, originally when we started this plan back in 2014, we had iPads in the primary grades. We had Chromebooks in like grades 3 or 4 to grade 8, and we had laptops in the high school. And we actually found that the power of the Chromebooks just have increased through the years, and they do everything that the other devices will do, and they're much easier to maintain. So we've been making that move, and it's been a good move. 9th and 10th graders have been using it, as well as we've pushed them down into the 1st and 2nd grades in the elementary school. The next slide, and again, stop me if you have questions. This is really just the dollars behind that last slide. And the main point with this slide is really to show that we do all these purchases through the BOCES, and so we leverage state aid as much as possible. It's a lot of dollars, and we try to have the minimal impact on the budget as we can. And you can see those numbers on the bottom, the very last row. Those are, I call that's the net impact to the budget. So year to year, when you factor in state aid, that's kind of how it's affecting the overall cost of the district. Obviously, we're spending money, but we're getting quite a bit of money back with state aid. And so that's what makes this whole long-range purchase plan tenable for a small district like ours. Last slide is an overall view of technology expenses and what we propose in our budget next year. Biggest change here in these, there's an increase in contractual costs. You see that one, and that's really due to a couple things. One, we've taken on some new systems. We have a new PA system. We have a new lockdown system, and we've done some upgrades to our Wi-Fi throughout the district. And those have driven some increased contractual costs for the support plans. Cisco in particular has changed the way they license their access points, which has really driven up that cost. So that's why you see the increase there. The other big move is you see materials and supplies are decreased. Those dollars are really just shifting down to BOCE services. We were able to negotiate our managed print services, which we hire a company to take care of our toner and printer repairs and such. We were able to get that under a Questar COSER. So we're spending that same money, but we're getting aid on it now, which is the bottom line there.
Scott, do you mean, is it one-for-one reducing materials and supplies by 22K, increasing BOCE services by 22K?
That's not the only driver of the increase in BOCE services, if that's what your question is. It's the largest part of that 35,000, but it's not the only cost that's increasing.
Okay. I just didn't know if all that decrease was shifting into BOCEs or
Oh, all of the 22,000 that's coming out is going into that BOCEs, if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
Yeah, there's some miscellaneous materials and supplies we still have to purchase that are not print related. That's the 4,000 that's remaining in that code.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, that's a sorry.
So when I see your budget, but then you're talking about the state aid reimbursement, is that going to be in the revenue side of things?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm looking at here is what you're going to spend, but I don't see what you're.
Yeah, and it's hard to match it up the way they do it, but yeah, that's why I have that previous slide. So you can kind of see what it works out to if you were to get a net number, you know. And those BOCE services, that number that's up there right now, again, as Todd said, I think I have 2 items in a big chart that have asterisks on them. They're all estimates. And we just use 3% as a good estimate. So that number will change. I'd like to say it always goes down. It's not always the case, but usually it does. So.
And I recall is the aid comes back a year later.
Correct.
So you don't see the revenue this year, you see next year.
Correct. Any other questions?
Scott, moving ahead, do you see any significant changes, kind of looking 3 years out on our computer buy program or anything else, or it's working, keep going?
The long-range purchase plan is working, and I'm very happy with it. I mean, the only thing that I can see happening is, of course, cost of devices. You know, they kind of fluctuate up and down year to year. But so does our enrollment. So to date, that we seem to plan ahead. So like when we purchase when I say a third of the devices, well, we figure in an extra 5 or 10% to those devices, right? So we tend to budget conservatively in this district, and that's worked well for us, especially in this arena. So, yeah.
Is the cost at the bottom is that what you still need to spend? Where it says what you have to spend?
You mean the budget? Where are you talking?
No, the district must spend. In the
Oh, yeah, we never have trouble with this. This is the cap that the state says. So for hardware, for instance, I have to spend $16,860 to get that's the cap for our reimbursement. Right?
Okay.
We budget $24,000. That's that equipment line.
That's fine. I just didn't understand.
Yeah. And that is a formula that's calculated based on our enrollment and so forth.
And Scott, these are just laptops, so whether it's students or faculty, it wouldn't include like smart boards and things like that?
No, and that is one thing that we haven't ever wrapped into the long-range purchase plan. But to be honest, we've done a good job. We sort of do that on the side, right? So big upgrades, like we're doing right now, we're replacing all the projectors and interactive boards in the classrooms, right? We're able to do that through a capital project or through some funds at the end of the year. That works out well for us. And that's been that way for quite a while. It's been a good system. Maybe in the future we'd have to look at wrapping those into the long-range plan, but we haven't seen a need to do that at this point.
Hello. All right. On to
school personnel services. So as you can see from the slide, there's a significant increase here in this budget line. And the costs driven in this specific line have to do with our tuitions to public and private placements, BOCES, itinerant services, E&L services, as well as our occupational and physical therapy services. But with that said, I thought it would be helpful to kind of break down the programs we have now. I know in the past questions have come up about bringing students back to district, creating different programs, and trying to offset some costs within the special education realm. So I want to kind of take a pause and give you a brief overview of what we currently have, and then kind of circle back around to the increase, if that's okay. So currently at Ellis, we have a K2 12-on-1 program. And when I say 12-on-1, it's 12 students, a teacher, and a teaching assistant. So when you hear those terms, you know that's the language I'm talking. So in our K2 12-on-1 program, that program specifically meets the needs of students with multiple disabilities, such as autism, speech and language impairment, students that really need adaptive and adaptive behavioral and under adaptive there's physical needs, so such as toileting, those types of things. So on a side note to that, this this K2 program that we've kind of revamped this school year and included some different staff in there to specifically support these types of students. We had 3 students last year in a preschool program that had that needed a self-contained programming. And because we've kind of redesigned the support system in this classroom, and yes, thank you, Todd, now that class has a bathroom in it, so we can help accommodate those needs, we were able to bring back 3 students into our kindergarten that would have created an additional cost. So that was a positive for our K2 program. And so we're going to continue to look at that to try to keep, now that we have a support system in place there, to really keep covering that need and trying to offset those costs. In our 2nd and 3rd grade, we have a 12-on-1 that also is for students with multiple disabilities. Same type of thing, but not to the level as the K2. And then in our 4-5, we have a 12-on-1 class, which it has some of those multiple disabilities, but also has some students that have significant learning needs in areas of reading and math. So that's at Ellis. In our middle school, we have 2 programs. We have a 12-on-1 life skills that focuses on those adaptive skills, the physical toileting, that type of thing. And then we also have a 12-on-1, which I'm calling it kind of like a learning academy type thing. The students that are in that self-contained class are kind of fluid. They move in and out based on their significant needs. So they start in there for the individual reading support, math support, and then transition out with support to science and social studies. So I keep that in mind. That's what I call like an academic program. And then for high school, we have another life skills class, 12-on-1, that supports 9th and 10th graders. We have a 10 through 12, 12-on-1, which is an academy type program. And then we also have a 10-12, 8-1-1 program that what we call is our access program. It supports our behavior students at the high school level. So that's what we have. And we're very proud of what we have. We've accomplished these programs, and because we have created these programs, we have other districts that offer or request to come and have their students join our program, which we'll talk about in the revenue section of it. So the question might be, well, why then is the tuition cost going up by 16.48%? Well, that happens to include 3 students that one district newly moving in that requires a therapeutic program, and then 2, which are our students that we've exhausted all our resources. So when it gets to the point where we are unable to manage the psychiatric needs of students, we, are required to come back to committee, really look at the data and say, okay, listen, we have tried our best to accommodate these students, but their behavioral psychiatric need is way more than we can program for within our district. So I know it seems like a significant increase, which it is, but it really is looking at 3 students that are tipping the scale, but we're not at the capacity to be able to program for those.
Brooke, so do you mean that we're sending them out, or that we just, okay?
Yeah, so we're currently looking for, 1 has already been placed in a program, and 2, we're sending out referrals looking for. So,
Do those costs, when we have to send them out, do you incorporate the transportation costs for that, or is that going to be under Mary?
no, that's going to be under Mary, but that also becomes.
So this is just the placement cost, tuition?
Yes, yes. So, and here's the thing, there's only so many programs now that are available for students, and we're trying our best to keep everybody in-house, but once you tip that point where there's med management and there's that trauma piece, we're not at that capacity to do that. So we try to look at, if we already have a bus going to a certain agency that can meet the needs of that student, great, let's try to share some transportation, and I'm sure Mary will talk more to that. But yeah, there's a cost to that as well. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On your 1211s,
Mhm.
just in general,
Yeah.
are they at capacity?
I have 1, well, we're functioning about 9 or 10. So no, but we're functioning at like 9 or 10. 1 has 8, but I like to be able to have that flexibility because you never know if the student is moving in. If I hit the 12 mark, then I have to apply to the state education department for a variance.
Okay. On your out-of-district placements, when you go out and search for one,
Yep.
do you find that their this is a stupid question.
No, it's
Do you
okay.
find their costs are increasing because of the rarity of an available spot, or are they increasing because of the general inflation of things?
Well, I think it's a combination of both.
Okay.
I think what's happening in our society with students is we're seeing a lot of psychiatric needs. So with these programs, they're hiring, licensed mental health physicians, behavior specialists, psychiatric nurses. So that also is driving up the cost a little bit. And in some places, it's difficult to, like, there are some programs, for instance, today I was talking to the gentleman at Devereaux, which is a private school over in Red Hook, and they can't find anyone. So they actually have to shut down a classroom, and they're not taking any more students on.
Another question. There may be a notion in the community, not our community, but several communities, that there's more and more students being identified, or they want to be, or someone wants them to be identified for a particular purpose. Do you find that here?
Yes, very much so. I don't want to say movement, but there are families that, well, here's the thing. There's a lot of things that go into identifying a student. So it's a matter of educating families in, okay, we have a RTI process. So I don't know if families are aware of all of the supports that we provide going up to, a child being classified. So what happens is it's about educating families and saying, okay, well, we have a tiered intervention system here that we are providing students, And it's not that your student is going to be left behind, so to speak, it's that they are receiving some remedial support. If they get to a point where they're not responding to that support, then that committee, which Melissa oversees, makes a determination, well, there's something not right here, we need to make a referral to special education. So it's a matter of educating families and parents and saying, yes, we have all of these supports in place. We don't want your child to fail, but if they're not responding, then we'll make the recommendation to special education. Now, with that said, any parent, if they want to not go through that process, can say, I want my child evaluated, and refer to the Committee on Special Education or to the 504 committee, and we would evaluate them. But what could happen is the evaluation could show that that student did not meet the threshold in the eligible for that service or IEP or 504.
So then you offer RTI.
So then it has to get kicked back to the RTI process.
But I think, do you find that since COVID, there's an increase in needs, particularly, let's say, with the younger students?
Yeah, definitely an increase in need, primarily behavioral needs. We're seeing a significant increase. I think we, as a district, have done a really great job at really targeting those early intervention skills in the reading and in the math, and as well as the speech and language. We have our speech therapists pushing into our primary classes, as well as we have occupational therapists pushing in. So we have a lot of supports that are targeting our younger kids and supporting, but I think the major thing is the behavior piece of it. Yeah. You're welcome.
All right, good evening. I'm going to kick off building principals talking about some of the needs within our buildings here. One of the things that, starting back in November, we started working with our teams and departments about their requests for the 25-26 school year. Our faculty, K-12, does a great job of really taking a look at things they need and provide us a rationale for the things that they're requesting. In terms of equipment, if you look at this slide, the equipment up here, anything that we're recommending for equipment is something that costs over $1,000. So teams and departments have already provided us quotes, which is where we're getting this proposed number from. And you can see up there from a kind of K-12, we are only up $100 in an increase this year. The increases really are a little at the high school. Well, all three buildings always, our music department is always usually purchasing a new piece of equipment, of stuff that's aged out. And so again, that's what a lot of our departments are looking at is the age of equipment, the safety of it, and then just needs for providing the academic programs they're looking to do. Any equipment that falls under $1,000 would be in our supply codes, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. In terms of increases for this year, really what we're looking to do, the music department is purchasing one new instrument, but there's also that increase of $1,700 for a portable speaker and a subwoofer that will complete the set that we purchased last year. So if you were looking at that in last year's documents, we have about the same exact price of this for, again, using it with our musicals, with the concerts to support the sound systems there. I was talking to Mr. Meredith today. It's also something we can use out in our gazebos and things like that. So it's just a system he was talking about that we just kind of need to have because we really don't have anything that would allow us to move things from a portable standpoint throughout the building. And then just, there, like I said, the only real increase there was at the high school level. And just with the PPS, Special Education Department equipment, those things are really just unforeseen student needs or typical needs that we have. It could be things like toilet accessories, different communication and hearing devices. So that all falls under that equipment there.
Hi.
Yes?
So the loudspeakers and subwoofers, why does that fall into the high school versus being like a district-wide expense?
You know, the department, the K-12 department, they work well together. And so they kind of look at overall where the equipment is. I mean, so if needed for middle school, yes, we would go and talk to them. It's capped right now in the middle school, high school, middle music room, where we have a lot of the other sound equipment. But yeah, it would be something that is really, yeah, so realistically it is kind of a K-12 thing, yes.
And I think also, Kelly, that because this is the program component, it is related to students. So if you put it with the district, then that's not educational, it's in a separate thing.
I think you're just getting, why didn't we divide it over the three? Yeah, so our K-12 music department, you know, they meet every couple months and they definitely plan this out, so the request. So our next one is the contractual requests, and you know, these items, K-12 really look at things like our IB diploma program, any assembly programs in the elementary, middle, or high school, different awards, repair of classroom equipment. So every June we send out things like our microscopes and triple beam balances, and then also our musical instruments. We have a contract typically with John Keel to look to service our instruments that any of our students have or any of our ones that we don't hear. And this also includes physical therapy and occupational therapists. There's a negative increase here, you can see. So again, people are looking at things, where we could make some cuts on this. There's a little bit of increase at the, balanced out, because there was a little bit of increase at the high school level. That is just really some of the rising costs with graduation expenses, and then under the special ed contractual budget, you've heard us talk about Aperture the last couple of years. Just the cost for that service has gone up a little bit, and that's the one where we're able to survey our students just to see what their social emotional learning needs are that our PBS department uses. So, questions on that?
Good evening. Tonight I will be speaking to the material and supply requests portion of the proposed budget. I'll start at the elementary level. You'll notice a slight increase here. Those codes are used to provide supplies needed for classroom instructional units. The increase here is a result of recoding of costs associated with the instructional materials for science specifically. So this cost was previously a BOCES code. At the middle school level, the majority of material and supply increases address instructional needs, particularly in the areas of science, CTE classes with labs and projects, as well as supplies needed for extracurricular clubs, including the science club and the ping pong club. At the high school level, this increase can be attributed to the inflated cost of materials and supplies, which affects some department budgets, including tech, ag, art, and science. And then finally, in regards to special education, you'll see a fairly noticeable increase there, percentage-wise, at least for special ed materials and supplies. That overall increase can be attributed to the purchase of some digital psychological testing assessments and protocols for our special education department.
Okay. So we'll move on to the textbook and classroom library requests. So at Ellis, it may look like there was an increase, but again, like Matt said, there was a recoding for the learning without tiers. It was previously purchased through Questar, so it will not be an option moving forward. So for this reason, we had to recode it, so it's no longer under a Questar purchase service. It's under our textbook money. The other part of this increase is for everyday speech, for the speech and language pathologist. This is a social skills curriculum that we use with our Tier 1 students. At the middle school level, you'll see that there was a decrease. But again, this is for classroom library sets and consumables, which are mostly the math textbooks that we use. For the high school, we have an increase. I feel like every time somebody spoke tonight, there was an increase at the high school level. But a bunch of our textbook money is for our math consumables. Also, every couple of years, something within our International Baccalaureate curriculum changes, and so whenever that changes, there's a need for new textbooks for our IB students, and so I believe it's new science textbooks that are coming for International Baccalaureate.
I just have a question, and it's more for Todd. When we recode something, does that come down from Albany, or do we decide to recode it? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep. So this one that Chrissy just referenced, the Learning Without Tears, was something that Questar used to have on their list of things that you could purchase through them. In this case, it came off their list. On their end, it's no longer available to purchase through Questar, so okay, it can't be in a Questar code, has to be shifted over to a non-Questar code. Some of the other areas, and I referenced this at the last meeting, and the pages and the supporting documents, there's a list. It was work that I did this year, just having been in this position for a year now and looking at where the codes are. Some of it just made more sense to restructure things. So some was really a lot with Scott. Some of our technology codes were in all different places. Some were in guidance, some were in the building budgets. Like, no, these are all really under Scott's domain in IT, so let's put them, it just made sense. So it wasn't required by any means, it's just kind of like, let's clean this up a little bit after some years of maybe not looking at it. It was just me focusing on it. So. You're welcome.
Okay, the next slide will be our BOCE service requests. Melissa and I will take turns and share this slide. So you can see that there is an increase, there's an increase for our proposed budget for next school year with this slide, with BOCE services. Part of it is the Questar graduation pathways. Those are all of our CTE programs that we have. That's Tech Valley, that's New Visions, which is also a Questar program, but those are specialized programs. There's about 5 or 7 of them now. Those are just for seniors. And then we have the P-Tech STEM High School that's over at, based on Hudson Valley. You've already heard from Brooke about the special education placements, but this line is specific to those students that are going to other BOCES placements. We have arts and education. You've probably heard, we've talked about that a bit before too. So arts and education, and there's an exploratory enrichment service. Arts and ed allows districts to bring artists or art programs to students that support school curriculum, school programs that they already have. So it is something that is aidable. The exploratory enrichment portion of arts and ed provides opportunities for districts to use resources that are already out there, facilities or staff from area museums, like educational institutions or content experts, and we can bring them in and have them come visit us, or we do the virtual, kind of like virtual field trip, something like that. An example of how we use arts and ed is Nature's Classroom. Our high school musical, some of our artists that are in the pit musicians, we put them through arts and education. Some of our field trips, but again, all of this that's up here is aidable through Questar.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about a mental health service provided by Twin County Recovery. Earlier this year at one of our board meetings, we brought up that in the perception survey that parents and students fill out every year, this year, there was a concern from students and parents regarding substance abuse and what we were doing as a district to help with prevention and education of our students. So after that, we did some research. Some of our local districts also use Twin County Recovery Services, and they've used them for the past several years and had found it to be a really wonderful service. In reaching out to them, we were able to secure someone to come in this year as a trial period, 2 days a week to work with individual students to provide lessons for our middle schoolers and high schoolers on substance abuse, on using coping strategies, how to kind of advocate for yourself with your peers. And so we started that this year, and next year we're hoping to continue that.
Are students taking advantage of it?
Yes, yeah. So right now we've had our prevention specialists go into a couple of our classes in middle school and do some lessons. We've reached out to several of our students who we know have used in the past, have had discipline issues regarding vaping or substance abuses, and started there. And then students who we suspect were using through their guidance, knowledge of their guidance counselor relationships, their teacher relationships, we started there and really built on those relationships to bring our students into the prevention counselor. And from feedback from certain students, it seems to be successful, but it really comes down to those relationships, how well they trust the staff that they're working with. And our prevention counselor's name is Shannon Richardson, and she really starts with building that relationship with them and providing them with whatever they're struggling with.
Are you familiar with their pricing structure? How does it work?
Yeah, so...
and you're asking for an increase in...
Yeah, so, right now, it's just a trial period, so we actually have Shannon coming in for free right now, 2 days a week, January through the end of the year. And what it is there are two parts. We can have her part-time where she comes in 2 days a week, or we could have her come in 4 days a week. And that difference is basically it's $25,000 for 2 days a week and $50,000 for 4 days a week. And then it is payable through our BOE fees.
So just to be clear, what's in the budget request is what we currently have this year that's been offered for free is what that would cost if we continue it next year, which is the $25,000.
So that's the increase.
That's the increase, correct.
Okay, athletics. Just really on that first slide, I'll draw your attention to the 47 paid coaching positions. We did add 4 additional assistant coaching positions, one soccer, girls soccer, boys soccer, baseball, and softball. And next year, we're looking at, we had 6 girls participating in the wrestling program this past year. I don't know if you know, but girls wrestling is like exploding right now. And so we're hoping, so 3 of those were at the varsity level and 3 of those were at the modified level. 2 of those kids will be moving up to the 9th grade, so we should have 5 girls. I've also heard from a lot of kids like that they might want to try wrestling. So we're looking at trying to fold that in to the budget for next year to have an additional wrestling coach.
Thanks. I'm sorry, question. You said you added 4 coaches. Is that already, or is that what you're?
Yeah, already, with those as 4 assistant coaching positions. And I think that's it for this slide. And then this next one is our physical education budget, and actually Todd folded in health education into this, so you'll see some increases there and some decreases because of that health education budget. So the contractual, we went down by $150. Materials and supplies was taking some materials and supplies from health education because they were sitting at a $3,000 budget. And then the last slide there is our athletic budget. Very minimal increases to the athletics. Really, it's just inflation and so forth. But you'll see a contractual $2,400 for an increase there, and really most of the contractual costs in athletics are for officials. So every year the officiating fees go up, and we strategically move some money around in that area, just based on the last couple of years of usage, and put some monies into some other areas. And I would say most of that has to do with more and more coaches doing tournaments here, which is wonderful to bring people into our community because we have great facilities. And I like to showcase those. But when you do that, there's an increase in officials' fees. Materials and supplies is not significant, a little bit here and there for coaches, and that's all just based on what they need in their program. And our BOCE services is, again, minimal, and that's that huddle, Schedule Galaxy, all those types of programs that we have for in the program.
Denise, for uniforms, where would uniforms fall into?
Uniforms falls into our materials and supplies. And that
Materials
budget
and
line
supplies.
is pretty significant every year. That's one of our highest budget lines.
And how frequently do we rotate out to buy new uniforms?
It just depends on the sport and stuff. Like some of our sports, like say softball and baseball, you're gonna need to replace, like sometimes we'll do replacement pants, right? Because they're gonna get chewed up during the season. So we'll do like 6 to 8 pairs of, pants every single year. Most of ours will go on a 4-year replacement cycle. And if they're high use, then it might be 3.
Sure. Good morning, Mayor. So obviously, I'm here to do the transportation and bus garage program component. Pretty sure you guys know how much we travel. We travel 135 square miles approximately in 11 townships. And we travel approximately 1,700 miles per day. And we transport about 1,107 students, so it's a little less than last year, actually. Regular runs, we have 20 daily runs for early pickup routes. It shows a wide variety of routes, both during the school year and summer school routes. Some are in-house while others are contracted out. During the year, we communicate with neighboring school districts and try to collaborate with them on possible intermunicipal agreements, of which these could be we are transporting for that neighboring school district, or they are transporting for us and we are sharing the cost. So this is just a quick update. We have been looking at decreasing routes, which are no longer possible because I have decreased as much as possible. So we are at a point in the transportation world where the bus driver shortage increases are going to create some issues for us very, very quickly and within the next 3 to 4 years. But I'm looking at some retirements this year. I'm hopeful I can put the charm on and keep them here a little bit longer.
Mary, just really quickly, is there some way we can support you in finding drivers?
We have, I think, exhausted many options. We do ride and drives. We have posted. I know that Erin has posted on several media websites. We have internally just been pay, sent out to your friends. We've done bonus before in district where employees, if they were to refer, it's really just the type of industry. It's just not something that people are really looking for as a career. We have a lot of older drivers, so it's getting there. We're trying. We're doing our best.
Do you want to mention the split positions that we have?
We did.
We created this year.
We created a few split positions, which I think is increasing everybody's attitude on staying, because we've had some issues with, people need insurance. They need to make a living. 4 hours a day is just not enough. So creating 3 split positions, 1 for food service and 2 for buildings and grounds, has created some really good rapport that way. So that's made 3 people in the department happy.
So they are drivers and then they have a second role, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that's good. So we
Before moving on, 2 questions. Thanks, following up on that. Are there opportunities to create more split positions?
There's the possibility. The ones that were created were based on open positions in other areas. So for example, we had an opening in food service. Happened to be that there was a driver that applied for that, was qualified very much so it worked out really, really well. The other 2 in buildings and grounds, again, similar situation. One, it was a current employee who had been in buildings and grounds for many years, but also did driving on the side and had previously been a driver. She actually approached the district and asked, would you be open to, you need drivers so badly, I can split, which we did that early on in this school year. That then created the opportunity, okay, for the other half of that position, because it was a full-time B&G, now that person went down to half B&G, half transportation. There was an opportunity for another half B&G, half transportation, so that created that one. So certainly, if other positions are open, right, we have to post for other positions, and it works within the hours that Rich needs, for example, in buildings and grounds, and Mary needs as transportation, we'll absolutely continue to look at that.
Okay. And trying to get a better sense of what the driver situation is like today.
In terms of
I guess you said you can't afford to lose anyone else, right?
No.
But you don't, are there any retirements? Is this bus driver shortage to increase retirements? I think you said in 3 to 4 years.
So I can't predict what people are going to do over the summer. That gives them time and opportunity to reflect on where they are in their second retirement status, because they probably already retired from another job and are, so we're talking between 60 and 70 years old. They're working on, well, how many more years do I really have here? So I've had some talks with them. They've come to me and said, hey, and I'm not sure I'm going to stick around for another 2 years, maybe another 3 years. I've had one say, I'll give you this year, but then this year's over and, you know, we talk again and you might want to do one more year with us. And so we try, but I don't know how long that's going to last. So we're doing the best that we can with what we have.
Hopefully this won't ever be necessary, but do you have a contingency plan if, for example, one more person were to leave, or you were to get in a situation where you, I heard you can't cut more routes or consolidate more routes, but do you have a plan if one we lose one driver, how to manage that? I understand it probably depends on which driver, which route.
We've temporarily consolidated routes, so buses are at maximum capacity. If there were to be more personnel moving in and drivers, we would absolutely go back to what we started, because it's easier for the driver, it's easier for the children, obviously. But in the future, we may have to look at some constructive ways to try and continue to get the students to school. Policies may need to be changed. It's going to make it increasingly harder to secure the ones that we have. So walking distances, you know, they may need to be looked at. There are a lot of things that we can do as a district to discuss. I don't know how well the community would like that, but in the future, we may have to think about it.
Mary, right now, how often, like your worst case scenario, where like you have to drive or?
The beginning of the year was very difficult. We could be down 6 to 8 routes in one day. So I was driving every day. Mechanics are driving. Sarah helped. She was very helpful. She would come. She
didn't drive.
She did not drive.
She probably couldn't. She didn't drive.
No.
She took over dispatch.
You know, Kristen, you know, two mechanics that were there after too. So it was very difficult in the beginning. It seems to progressively gotten a little bit easier, but we go through ups and downs. It's just hills and hurdles. It's the never changing venue over there, which makes my job very exciting. But you know, so right now it's leveled out a little bit.
Mary, could you foresee getting to the point where it's almost like we need to shift things in the sense that having designated bus stops that parents have to go to?
That's an option. The problem is it's still the same amount of students with the same capacity on the buses, and it's going to be difficult if we lose people, right? So we're still not going to be able to maintain the same amount of routes that we have, whether we have those bus stops or not. Split schedules, you need to have more people. So like I've already been playing over and over again the different scenarios of what can and cannot happen. And there are some that are too difficult to even think about for us. But I don't know, we would have to visit it. We would would have to really sit down and discuss and look at the routes and see if that was going to be helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Say compared to 2 years, and if you don't know this number, that's fine. Like 2 years ago, how many routes did we have versus the 20 that we are now?
We had 24 and we're down to 19.
Okay, thank you.
So we did our bus purchase for the 24-25 school year. We were supposed to receive those buses in the summer of 24. We just received our last bus during this vacation break, which had to be sent back. But it will be coming back again. We've had several issues with the company we've been working with, but they're working very hard to please us. So that is good. Our next bus purchase is 25-26 school year. We have spec'd out our next round of large buses to secure a spot in the production. Our account executive always says it's a year and a half, but sometimes it's a little bit more. I don't know what's taking them forever other than shortages in people, parts. All of that is creating a crunch on all of us. So we currently have 30 large and 11 small buses. We are holding on to the smalls as long as possible because our the chassis that we prefer are very limited. So we're looking to possibly purchase another small next year. We do use the smalls for the sped runs in the summertime, so they're very important to keep as long as possible. So the mechanics are doing their best to keep them up to par for us. So,
Mary, do you happen to know where the buses are made?
they are made out of state and then they are shipped in to Saratoga area and then driven here. Their main factory is out of the state. They always ask me to go there. Come on, go check out the factory. So we're also, no, I'm not gonna go that far away. I have too much work. Continued work with Cornice on the work with bus electrification by 2035. What this will look like is an on-site visit, which is what happened here, and they looked at the facility to see if we were able to handle a one charger, one bus situation. So they are saying that's possible. It is located, the transformer, outside of the main garage in transportation. It is they're saying we need a 3-phase charger. So their specifications are all in the report that we received. And hopefully we will be able to purchase a BB by 27-28 and start the process of the infrastructure and how that fits into the project.
The bus that was sent back, what was wrong with it?
There was a gap in the emergency side door.
Sounds like a problem.
Several of the buses came that way, and they all went back, so it obviously is a manufacturing issue.
Okay.
You can see out, yeah.
And on bus electrification, remind me, where did you get the cost estimate, including analysis of potential utility rates?
Well, they're still working on, so what we did was set up a new replacement plan and sent it over to them, so they are still in the process of working on the next phase and sending it to us.
Do you know where that's due?
We are not a priority at this time, but they are working on it. There are other schools. It is the truth. That is exactly what we were told. There are other schools that are actually, ready to implement the systems, and we're just in the beginning process. And I think we're in a good spot. And as soon as they get back to us, we'll let you know.
Thanks. One more question. The schools are very ready to actually implement. How can we learn from their experience, since they'll be implementing it before we're ready to?
Well, we deal with Matthews, which are Thomas buses, and they travel to Bethlehem, which has electric buses, so we get a little bit of insight on how the systems are working, how the buses are working, what's been going on with them. So just reaching out, collaborating with them, talking to them about how it's working and what's going on. So you you can see we have various increases into the equipment. So the purchase that we need to do this year is to install a new lift because we've had some serious issues with it. We had a repair cost of over $11,000. Mohawk Lifts, it has given us a good price on a new lift system. The system was purchased in 2006. It is over 20 years old, and we would like it to be able to support the infrastructures for the new EV buses. So
That was going to be my question. So installing this new lift isn't going to be like a short-term thing, this can be used going forward for our just to make the transfer.
yes, it will handle the weight of them. We have various increases in outside labor. We are taking care of the older vans, so they need some more outside fixing up more than the other larger buses. Insurance liability, software maintenance fees, radio fees, they've all gone up in current costs. And tire prices, more B&G equipment requiring tires that need to be mounted in balances. And BOCE services has also gone up, and that is our drug and alcohol testing fees. Bus garage budget transportation, the increase to contractual is for repairs to the bus garage, and this increase is to match what has actually been spent over the past 2 budget cycles since the code was under budget.
I'm just going to go back for 1 second. So the other line on here refers back to the conversation we were having earlier with Brooke, the contract transportation fees. That's the increase for some of those placements of students in specialized programs. To get the students to those programs, that's what that number is, the contract transportation.
Thanks. And again, this increase due to, I don't know what said, is it just a inflationary increase or are there more greater need?
This specifically is for an additional run. So there's one additional run we actually had to add it this year for a student, but carrying it over into next year. Separate placement, separate location, needed its own run.
And that's the cost for?
That's the cost for that, plus the increased cost just across the board, but the majority of that is an increased run. Thanks, Mary. And everybody else for considering. Thank you. So this slide is other program budget components in the program component. So there are kind of some other odds and ends that don't nicely fit into any of the areas that folks presented on tonight, so this kind of captures all those different areas. So other expenses, this includes health services, so what we pay for Greenville students, so residents of Greenville, but those students that attend other schools. So we have a responsibility to pay for the health services at whatever school they are at. So it could be a private school that we're paying for the health services. So that's that other expenses. And then in the BOCES line, this is, again, some things that don't fit in any of the other areas that we talked about tonight, like home instruction review, exploratory enrichment, this is in here as well. So textbook coordination, equipment contracts, so just kind of odds and ends of areas that don't fit other places. So some increases in those areas. Special aid fund. So this also connects back to what Brooke was talking about, but this is summer programming. So it's Summer Handicapped 4408 program. So these are students that by their IEP have a full year or extended year program, meaning that they attend the program over the summer months. This we get 80% reimbursement from New York State for the costs of these students to go to those programs. So we are responsible to pay 20% of those costs. The current amount that was budgeted in this current year, 24-25, was $70,000. At the current moment, I'm holding that to be the same amount. There is a possibility, we're still actually working through, believe it or not, costs from last summer and getting final bills specifically from Questar of what we are responsible for from last summer. That will determine if this number needs to go up, and also looking at placements with Brooke. If it goes up, it might just be by a couple of thousands of dollars. But this is kind of a separate area that we budget specifically for that purpose. And then food service. So interfund transfer for food service. If you remember back a number of years ago, the food service program at the end of the year would have a negative balance, and we had to actually make it whole through the general fund. So we had to have money set aside specifically to transfer to the food service fund. For a number of years now, we have not had to do that because we've had a positive fund balance, meaning that the food program overall is making money throughout the course of the year. So if you look at the chart on the right, this shows the end of year for each of those academic years, how much was positive fund balance, or how much the program made that didn't get expensed out. So at the end of the 23-24 school year, there was a positive fund balance of $241,000. So each year, that number has increased, partly because the food service program is just doing really well. And then really, this year, that's also different because of CEP, which is what allows us to provide free meals to all students, so we get more reimbursement from state. So all that to say, we are not looking to budget any money in next year's budget for the purpose of making the food service program whole. It will sustain itself.
Todd, just a quick question. On the 2020-2021, it says 15,000. Is that because of COVID? I mean,
I'd have to go back.
It's 147 versus 167, so it looks like a typo, like it should be 158. If you could just double check that.
I will double check.
Thanks.
I'd also have to go back and look. It wasn't too many years before that it was actually a negative number there.
Right.
So it was also slowly making up the negative and coming into the positive.
Okay.
But yeah, I can check that.
Todd, where typically would that money have been transferred from?
So it was transferred from general fund. So there is an appropriation code in general fund that is interfund transfer to cafeteria.
And that's going to be zero now?
It has been zero at least the past 4 or 5 years, and yes, will be for next year as well. All right, so this brings us to kind of some summary for the evening. So another budget formula, or way of looking at the budget, which is probably the simplest and most important one, is on one side we have all of our expenditures, right, our planned expenses for the year. And on the right-hand side, we have the revenues, the planned earnings. I added this in, sorry. I was working on some things today, and I'm like, I need another slide. So you might not have this in what you printed out. I just added it today. So that's the simple budget formula, right? We have to make sure that we balance that. What we have on one side for expenditures equals what we have on the other side for revenue. So the little pie charts I pulled from last year's budget presentations, because it's for this current school year, the 24-25 school year, just gives you a quick overview in a pie chart form. What are all the different areas of expenses, and then what are all the different areas of revenue, right? So at the end of the day, those two have to be equal to make sure that we have a balanced budget. The revenue side and the rest, well no, I should say this differently. The rest of the expenditure side, capital administrative, will be next week's presentation, as well as the entire other side, which is the revenue side. But tonight, I think it's important we take a little bit of time to talk a little on the revenue side, just in terms of state aid and our tax cap. So this cycles back to what we talked about last meeting about that tax cap piece. So the tax cap calculation, which in next week's presentation or supporting documents, there's a spreadsheet that gives you all the different components and all the different pieces of data that go into this formula that is set by New York State. While it is called the 2% tax cap, right, that's what we often refer to it as, that does not mean it's automatically 2%. There's all these different pieces of data that go into the formula, and we get what is our allowable tax cap. So on the bottom of this slide, it shows for the past 4 years, including this current year, what was the allowable tax cap for the formula, and then what was the actual tax levy that we put up a budget for that amount. So for example, if you look just for 24-25, for this current year, the allowable tax cap was 3.17. We went out with a tax levy increase of 2.5%. So we were under the tax cap in that situation. For this current formula, looking at next year's tax cap, what we can increase the tax levy by, it comes in lower. So the tax cap is at 1.83%. Meaning that if we were to go above that 1.83% for the tax levy, we would need a supermajority vote when it comes to the budget vote in May. All that makes sense, yes. Another slide I added, hot off the press. This was as of Friday, so even today some of this shifts a little bit, but this is accurate for the purpose of presenting tonight is if we take what we were presenting tonight and what we currently have in the preliminary budget and look at the tax levy increase, so that's the left-hand column. The middle column is what it would result in, so the total amount of taxes that we would collect. And then what would the deficit be if that was the tax levy that we went out with? So the question that's been asked a couple of times by the board, for purposes of getting information out there, what would a 0% tax percent increase look like? So with the current preliminary budget, if we did not increase our tax levy, so went out at a 0% increase, we would have a deficit of $825,000. Meaning that $825,000 would have to be cut out of the preliminary budget, part of which was presented to you tonight. And then from there, I just kind of picked numbers 1.4, 0.5, 0.6, up to 1.83, so that's kind of bolded out in color for the purpose of that's our allowable tax cap. So right now, if we went out of that maximum tax cap of 1.83, we would still have a deficit of $484,459. So still work to be done, which we're continuing to work on. If we wanted to keep everything in the budget that we currently have, how high would we have to raise that tax levy up? Roughly 4.43% would get us into the positive of we have an extra $250 to spend. But that again would require a supermajority vote. So this is, I think, important for the board to have an understanding of tonight, because really at the end of next week's presentation, where we go more in depth with the revenue, it's important for us, for Mike and I, to get an understanding of what the board is comfortable with in terms of that tax levy percentage increase.
So 1.83 is the maximum allowed for 25-26?
Correct.
Okay.
That requires a simple majority, correct.
Can you give a dollar amount for the asks of increase for tonight's presentation?
Just on the program side? No, but I can get one. So just increases on the program side.
On everything that they asked for, in addition to basically roll over with more.
Right, rollover was slightly more than what we presented tonight.
So the rollover budget showed a bigger number than what they presented tonight.
They shouldn't have. My understanding is the rollover budget is whatever we had last year, strictly
It's the contract part that.
right, strictly contractual. Whatever we must pay, that's the number. Unless what was presented today was folded into your rollover presentation.
So some of the differences between the rollover budget and tonight, some of it's simple things like BOCES. We estimate a little high on the rollover budget. Then some of those BOCES numbers kind of start to come in, some of them are a little lower, so that pulls it down a little bit. The other area that, I don't know the exact number, but I can go back and look, the difference between the rollover and tonight is on the debt service side. So that was, again, what Chris presented at the last board meeting. He and I also have had a number of conversations behind the scenes on the debt service side. What I budgeted in the rollover was slightly different from what he came back with his most updated numbers of what to include for debt service for next year. So with all that taken into account, yes, the current preliminary budget is slightly lower than what was in the rollover budget.
It's not. What I'm asking is, if there were increases that were presented to us tonight, like equipment and athletics,
yep.
They asked for more money than what was issued last year.
Correct.
So all those increases, Mary asked for increases, the high school asked for increases. All those increases, were they part of your rollover presentation, or do you have a number for all those additional asks that were presented tonight? That's the number I'm looking
So some of the items presented tonight were included in the rollover. For example, BOCES, right? BOCES increase in costs we knew in the rollover. They may have been refined, they're slightly different.
Those were contracts, that's why you put it in.
Correct. Others, specific example, like material and supplies. Those increases, no, those were not in the rollover because that comes from the process of working with supervisors and
That's what I'm
buildings.
looking at. And if you don't have it, just if you could provide it to us.
Okay.
Because
I'll think of the
eventually
way-
if we caught something, right?
Yep.
That'll be a part of discussion.
Yes, I think, I can run a report and you can see if it's getting at what you want to be. The best way to look at it would be to look at just program component. So like I can run a report that just pulls out any program component, which was presented tonight. The 24-25 current year budget, and then what's the proposed budget? The preliminary budget. Yeah.
That'll be an increase.
Yeah, well, some areas there were decreases, a couple little here and there. The reality is though, also, in the items that were presented tonight, for the most part, so like Brian talking about contractual or the materials and supplies, textbook, these are small dollar figures in the grand scheme. The big numbers tonight are items that we have less control over, so special education placements, contract transportation, there's less ability to change that because we're obligated to provide those services. Correct.
Okay, a couple questions. Number one, in this component, in the program component presented tonight, we heard there were 4 retirements. Is there any positions cut? Is any of that changed? Or are we walking into the next school year with everything in place that we currently have?
That's something else we'll have to take a look at as we move forward in regards to class sizes and some of those things.
So the numbers presented tonight, do they take into account replacing those salaries? Or are they, I mean, in the program component, you have teacher salaries, you have the insurance, you have the retirement. Is it accounting for those positions being filled at this point?
So there's breakage in there that shows the difference projected, this is all an estimate, right? X teacher's retirement, X amount, what might we hire a teacher at for that
But that's in
position?
here.
The breakage is incorrect, is already in there. We're not gonna get anything more from the retirements, if that answers your question.
I wanted to make sure that they were being factored, that some sort of replacement is being factored in as a starting point. Okay. And then in terms of that, with the deficit, we're looking at that, but we don't have all your information yet. Is that after we get all the information, we have this deficit, or is that as of right now, but hold on, there's more coming next week?
No, that includes everything. So like requests from Rich for buildings and grounds that go into the capital component, I have those numbers. They're all in the system.
So
They're
we're
all
getting that,
factored
we don't have it
into
all
that
here
amount.
yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, you had technically the preliminary budget, like you can go down and look.
Yeah.
If you look at Rich's budget
That's
line, it's
this
not
one.
pick on Rich. Yeah, it's all in there. You just haven't presented on it yet to talk about, like, we're just gonna talk about a tractor next week. That's in his budget request, so. Those pieces.
So Todd, just to clarify, before retirements, right, the preliminary budget has 4 positions, but with new hires.
The breakage is in there, correct?
Okay, perfect, thanks.
This may be obvious for people following at home, just be sure. By breakage, you mean the savings. You hire someone at a lower rate.
Correct.
There's some savings there, you keep the position, but, okay. 2 questions, or maybe a comment and question, but the deficit you have in the right-hand column, if I remember correctly, last year, we got to the point through the budget process, we had a similar table, deficit. You guys went and worked your magic and came back with a budget that hit, the number that we asked you to hit, just by moving things around or saying we don't need this, we don't need that, right? So it looks like a deficit, but we're kind of at the same point we're similar points we were last year, right?
Yes, however, I've now been in this role for a year, so I've done some things earlier this year than I did last year. So what I mean by that, specific example, transportation aid. So on the revenue side, our transportation aid is based on what we actually expend each year. Last year, I probably did it this week after this meeting, that was my next stage chore. For this current year, already baked into all that, I did that already. So last year, that helped us out, because between this meeting and next week's meeting, last year, some of those revenues came back higher. This year, I've already done that work, it's baked into that. So some of the things that helped our number last year are not going to be there this year. So while that number is comparable, behind the scenes, not so much.
Okay.
Can I interject?
Yes.
So I think I just heard you say that those numbers are probably more accurate than they were last year.
Yes. More updated to date, correct. And that's really on the revenue side. Some of the pieces that go into the revenue, transportation aid, the aid that we get back for high-cost students, those were pieces last year that were done in between these two meetings to get ready for the revenue. This year I was able to get them done, even though we didn't talk about all those pieces on the revenue side, we will talk about it next week. That stuff has been updated. It will still tweak and adjust. I just had a conversation with Mary today, so like a little bit, but last year those numbers helped us out in between the two meetings.
Go ahead, Dick.
Maybe this is part of your presentation for next month.
Next week. We're back next week. Not a month, next week. 7 days.
Every time when I spend time with you, God, it seems like.
Sure, it is next.
Too early to talk about using reserves? Or some portion of it?
So that is part of next week, because that's part of the revenue side, right? Looking at our reserves and looking at our fund balance. Yes, that's next week. It's always a cautionary tale of you're paying out of your savings account to pay your bills, so, but it's part of the formula that can be talked about next week, yes.
Well, then part of that should be if we go out at 1.84, we've got to get 60%.
Yes.
Okay. Go at 1.83.
Which kind of brings the next question. When do you need us to kind of go around so that you can get a feeling of where we're netting out?
If you want to do that tonight, you're welcome to. We're going to revisit it next week as well, because that folds into the revenue conversation.
I'd like to.
I'm saying it now.
I think we should hear next week, but I'll do whatever the group thinks.
I'd like to wait for next week. I need to sit on this for
Todd, this is a better question for next week, next month. That's fine. Or if you want to think about it and get back to me, that's fine. But along the similar line, I guess, of my question earlier, Mayor, contingency planning. If, just hypothetically, things were to go sideways next year and there were to either be a significant shortfall in revenues or a delay in revenues for some reason, significant meaning on the order of hundreds of thousands, if not more than 500K or something like that, how would you kind of midstream deal with that? And I know I'm putting you on the spot again. If you want, I would like to understand. So
Yeah.
if you want to come back at some later time and talk about it, that's fine.
You certainly can. The reality is it becomes positions, right? The answer to that question is if things really became challenging, the majority of the costs in the district are on the personnel side of things. So to Dave's point, like, we're not going to fix that by not buying textbooks next year, right? It's just not where these large sums of money are. It becomes a really hard conversation about program and staffing and positions. Is my off the top of my head answer to that, but we can revisit it next week as well.
Next week we will have a portion of your presentation on how we get there. Suggestions?
Well, there's another budget meeting after next week too, right? Next week is still also just looking at what is in the proposed preliminary budget. So on the capital side and the administrative side, what's in there. I think it's after that conversation, okay, now how do we get to there? But like I said earlier tonight, a lot happens in a week. A lot will happen in a day. Between tonight and next week, there will be shifts and changes and updated numbers in different areas. So taking all those into account, where does that number land?
Any other questions? Okay. Okay, then I'm going to move on, because we do have some action items tonight. I'm assuming you were.
Okay.
I can turn it back over to you.
It's fine. We've talked about it enough. We're back next week to have a conversation about a capital administrative revenue, so that was the last slide. We're good.
Can you make sure we get, can you send us the slides that we're missing from the slide deck?
Yes, I'll ask that. Yeah, upload this version.
All right, then I'm going to move us on to the action items. I need a motion to approve the personnel agenda.
Kelly.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
No, you look like you were, yes, discussion, okay. Let's see, I need a motion to approve the 30-day emergency transportation contract bid to Kasaki Transport, Inc.
Eric and Angela.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And closing open forum, please note the same guidelines apply as stated during the first open forum. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Do we have any emails? No. Okay, all right, then I need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you.